Hello. Hi everyone. Today we'll continue looking at the RedHat Certified Engineer Exam question bank. Next, let's look at question 9, which is about disks. As for this disk question, actually we've already done something similar in a beginner level question, right? Like creating logical volumes, expanding logical volumes, and so on. In this question, it's also about creating and using logical volumes. The requirements for this question are mainly divided into the following points. First of all, the first point is create a logical volume that meets the requirements. What are the requirements? The first is the name, named data with a size of 1500. Then the name, or rather the name of the volume group. This refers to which volume group the logical volume is created in, and that is research. Next, the format should be EX294, so you need to format it with this file system. Finally, there's one more point. In addition to the usual partitioning or creating the logical volume, there's an extra condition added here. Or rather, there are two conditions. First, if your size is less than 1500 memdi, then create two partitions, one of 500 memdi and one of 800 memdi. Second, if the volume group does not exist, then display a message indicating that the volume group does not exist. And furthermore, do not mount the logical volume in any way. This is also a requirement. We do not need to mount this logical volume. We're just creating it. For this question, we're only required to create it. There's no need to mount the logical volume. Please pay attention to this point. Next, let's take a closer look at how to solve this problem. First of all, the requirements for this question are mainly divided into several aspects, which are creating a logical volume with a specified size, specified name, and specified volume group, as well as formatting it to a specific type, including this. We also need to write a conditional statement. If it's less than 1500, then we use 800. If there's none at all, then we just output a message indicating that none is available. This is actually achieved through conditional checks. Next, let's take a closer look at this. For question 9, the method for creating and using a logical volume. First of all, as the question requires, just as we mentioned earlier, there are a few key points to pay attention to, and the first is the issue of size. Second, make sure not to get the name wrong. Third, pay attention to the formatting type. As for the formatting type, in most cases nowadays we generally use the XFS format, and the EXT format is actually rarely used anymore. However, in this exam question, the default requirement is still the EX294 format. This is something you need to pay attention to. In addition, there are two supplementary pieces of information here. These two pieces of information may not necessarily take effect, but you still need to include them. You must write down these 2 points. If both of them are over 1/500, then they actually won't be used. But if, say, one of them is less than 1/500, then 800 will be allocated to it. And if, say, it turns out that one of them doesn't have this volume group at all, then a message like this will also be reported. So this is the overall requirement for our question. You must remember to include the last 2 points. Don't ever just think, oh, after I've allocated everything, right? After I've set the sizes and formatted them, I'm done. But no, that's not the case. You really need to pay extra attention here. What's the main reason for this division? We divide it into 2 parts. First, allocating the sizes as usual. Second, writing the logic for checks. Well, when the size requirements aren't met, how should we handle it? This is the main focus of our 9th question. So first, let's take a look at how we can use files to handle this. How do we use files to create and utilize our logical volume? First, let's take a look at the required file name, which is LVYML. That is, LVYML should still be in the directory. Here we create it directly in our file. Just create it directly in the answer directory. And edit LVYML. Alright, once we're in, let's start writing. First, according to the question's requirements, what do we need to create? We need to create something called a logical volume named data. Create a logical volume called data. So first of all, pay attention here. This time, for question 9, it's a bit different from the previous questions, or rather, it's finally back to normal. Hey, in the previous 2 questions, we often had to deal with roles, right? Now, when roles are involved, we have to separate everything, tasks, files, and all sorts of files, into different parts. But here, when we create and use logical volumes in the usual way, what does that mean? It just means we're using the standard module for logical volumes to create and manage them. What should everyone pay attention to here? The key point is that there's something not required in this case. Here you don't need to use a role, you can use it directly. So the first thing to remember is don't forget about hosts and tasks. Previously when we used roles, right? We just wrote everything directly in the tasks section, so there was only content under tasks. But in reality, here we need to include at least both hosts and tasks. Hosts specify the target machines and tasks specify the actions to perform. So here first, let's take a look at the name. What do I say? For the name, you can just write whatever you like. You can just make up any name you want. For example, let's write one. Let's call it create LVM, meaning create a logical volume. That's the first step. The second step is to specify the hosts here. What do we specify? We specify all. So, according to the requirements of the assignment, we need to run our tasks on all managed nodes, meaning the tasks will be executed on every managed node. Here, we press enter to move to the next line, and then the next step is tasks, where we define the specific tasks. First of all, what is the focus of this task? It's about creating a logical volume. So, for creating a logical volume, we'll be using a special module here, one that we haven't seen before, right? We haven't used this one previously. We're going to use this gun. Hey, blog. This block module, in fact, can be used for what in the future? Here we can directly use this block module. The main function of block is to configure our related hide disks or partitions and so on. And as for the name here, we can specify the name like this. For example, LV 1500 megabytes. After you finish setting up the 500 GB, what's next? The next step. But here we're not specifying the size yet. Here we're just writing a name, which means we're going to create a logical volume of 1500 GB. The specific configuration details come below. First, let's write our basic module, UDA community UI, and then add the following. General, and then add another dot followed by lvol. Alright. Once that's done here, what can we do next? We can just directly take this. The required configuration can just be written in here. The first configuration is about creating a group, because if you want to create a logical volume, what's the most important thing first? Actually, it's the volume A group. You need to have space before you can create it. Right? You can't just take a disk directly, right? Or just take something and use it straight away. That doesn't work. What do we need? We need to prepare in advance. So today we need to specify our volume group first. Now let's take a look at how to specify it. And then here we use this macro to specify our volume group. Research. This is the volume group required in the assignment. And here, as we can see, after specifying the volume group with LV, you can name it, for example, call it data. So data research is our volume group. As for LV, that's the new logical volume we're creating here. Creating a new logical volume, now a logical volume. Next, we specify the size. As for the size, here we set it to 1500. This is the size we've specified. Alright, up to this point, we've actually finished the first part. The first part is done, which is just creating our logical volume. For the second part, according to the requirements, besides creating it, what else do we need to do? We also need to do this For example, let's look here. After specifying the size, we can then specify our Here, let's first take a look at the method for digitizing or formatting. Now let's look at the specific way to write it. First, we write name. In name, we enter the information for the volume we created. And here we use dev plus. Here, what can we add? We can add this. Look at the first part. And after that, it's not the position. After we create it here, what do we need to do first? First, we need to declare something, declare what our format is, right? Declare the format first. Here, we use community and then specify it. General then, file system. Alright, after this brief introduction, next, after the colon, what do we start writing? We start writing our specific configuration. Then here, let's take a look at this. This part of the configuration is the specific format for our EX294. Next is about our path. As for the specific device or disk, it's the one we just mentioned in our dev directory. Research. Alright. After this, next is the research directory. Data. This word is R1. This is the second scenario, or rather the second step. The first step is to partition our logical volume, RHCE, and the second step is to format it. After we've finished setting up our logical volume, what should we do next in the third step? Next, we need to look at how to determine and troubleshoot issues. So right now, our first scenario is actually already okay, as long as the prerequisite is that our array size can reach 1500. If you can't reach 1500, what can we do? We can use this method. As for the following check, you can change 1500 to, for example, 800, or if it doesn't exist, you can just write does not exist directly. Both are fine. Alright, next, let's take a closer look at the third task and see the specific results. Next, we have our conditional statement. Here, we've already finished writing the first scenario. Starting from the second one, we need to write a conditional statement. The main purpose or function of this statement is actually to determine what we should do when we don't have enough for $1,500. So here, we make a choice. Let's go ahead and write out this condition first. As for the conditional statement, it's usually written at the end, almost always at the end. Also, you need to pay attention to how it's written at the end. What does it require? Well, it needs us to... The condition for one needs to be aligned with the content above, matching the alignment of that content. So the two need to be aligned. Therefore, here we can actually write when first, and then fill in the specific approach in the middle. Here, first, we make a judgment. Pay attention to the when. It needs to be aligned with it. This is a very common mistake. The indentation here is easy to get wrong, because as we go further, our content will get quite long. So if it gets too long, you might misread an indentation, which would make things inconvenient. So here we'll use when to make a judgment. Alright, so after we finish writing this part, let's first complete this conditional statement. Then we'll come back and fill in the specific logic for allocating the logical volume in the middle. As for the condition here, first we add our statement after when. As for this, the question usually requires some kind of error message. Just follow the requirements specified in the question. Here, when the size of our logical volume, not enough. When our size is less than 1500 megabytes, what do we need to return? We need to return a message, which is, if 500 megabytes is not enough, what do we need to do? We need to allocate 800 megabytes. If 1500 megabytes is not enough, we allocate 800 megabytes. So here, after we select this, search is by. Alright, after finishing the condition check, next let's go back and start writing the specific operation statements. Alright, let's start writing here. What are we actually treating this as here? We're treating it as a reallocation once again. Everyone should pay attention here. The content here and the content above. What are they actually? They belong to two branches, right? So it's a conditional, meaning there are two branches. You just wrote the one above for the 1500 MB case, right? For the one below, we still allocate according to 800 MB as usual. So after using the condition here, let's start writing the specific details. First, let's start with the name. Yeah, just add it after name. So, when we can't create this logical volume, or when there's not enough space to create the logical volume, what should we do? Well, that's where the following method comes in. We use this method. Here, pay attention. If we use our debug module again, we can output a message. What kind of message should we output? Let's write debug first. So, for convenience, what we do is output an error message. Please note, this error is not because there's something wrong with the content of our file, or that there's a formatting issue. Everyone, pay attention. That's not the case. This error occurs because our available space is insufficient, which causes the problem. So here, if you see an error for this question, don't worry. It's completely normal to see an error here. Why is that? Because if we really don't have enough space, right? If the space is truly insufficient, then of course an error will occur, right? There will be an error, and after the error, actually, if you look at our previous errors, you can see that after an error, what usually happens? Well, basically the script just stops running. But in this case, our error is actually just a notification, not a real error. So after we output this message, it won't cause our entire script to stop running. So here, everyone needs to pay attention. And when we run it in a moment, it's normal if you see an error. As long as the error you see is about this message saying that the disk space is insufficient, right? The one about needing 800 on 1 MB, then there's actually no problem. As long as it's this error, it's fine. Now, let's write out the specific message here. And as for the information to write, the question will also tell you. So here, let's write that the creation of the logical volume failed, right? We can't create the logical volume. Why is that? Because our size isn't sufficient, right? When we specify a size of 1500 MB, it's not enough to create it. So, we get an error. First, report the error, but don't stop there. After reporting the error, continue writing. As for the specific partitioning method, if we still can't reach 1500, then we'll just allocate, say, 800. Okay, for name, let's write it here. Actually, it doesn't really matter what you write for name. Anything is fine. Once you've specified it, next we'll just use this directly. Press enter and we'll start specifying the size, including formatting and other operations. Here, it's actually the same as before, just like we did previously. Next, let's start writing it out. So first, here. If we need to use this module, its name is community. Then here, after writing this, specify it. Use del_vol to specify the size of the logical volume. First, the name of the first volume group remains unchanged. It's a research. Second, we have this. What is the name of our logical volume? It's data. Third, the size. Just now 1500 wasn't enough, right? So how much this time? This time, let's use 800. This is my method of analysis. Of course, strictly speaking, this question isn't really about partitioning. So, to be precise, it's actually about allocating a certain amount of space from the logical volume. The function is basically the same as partitioning, but the terminology is a bit different. To be rigorous, it's not partitioning, but rather creating a logical volume. The first step is to create the logical volume, and the second step is to format it. Only after formatting can we officially start to mount or use our logical volume. That's how it works. So here, after we've finished specifying 800, the next step is as follows. Let's see, how do we proceed? We do it like this. With this content here, let's go ahead and create it. This is our dar LVM after VJS R research is defined, but we add the following. Here, there is still a snail missing. Let's add the snail by drawing it through the line. Add it. First, we need to specify a name, which is actually the same as before, right? There's nothing special about this step. All right, the next step is to format our file system. Community. After that, we add our Windows system, file system. The next step is to specify the exact formatting method or type. This is the same as what we've learned before, so we won't go into detail. Basically, it's just the EX294 type, and then you add the specific path where it will be located. Here we use this. Because downloading is part of the research process. So here, you can save this. At this point, actually, our content is basically finished, but not completely done yet. Yeah. Here, our requirements are, first, to allocate 1500 MB of space, which we've already completed, right? The second requirement is to click on the second conditional statement, meaning if it's less than 1500, we will change it. Change it to what? Change it to 800. So, yeah, we've also finished that part. It's all about making judgments right up to the end. There's still one more requirement, right? In fact, the question actually has a total of 3 requirements, to be precise. But actually, for each node here, we only need to fulfill one of the requirements. As long as you have enough space, you just need to complete the first requirement, which is to allocate a 1500 megabyte volume. If there isn't enough space, then we allocate 800 megabyte. If even 800 megabyte isn't enough or isn't available, then right? Then what can we do directly? We can just directly just check the information inside it. That's enough. If it really doesn't have it inside, then it should report. What should it report? It should report an error. So actually, in our second type of check here, there's already an error being reported right at this point. When it's less than 1/500, it will report this error, and then the allocation will be done based on 800. And if you don't even have 1/500, or even 800, or if it's not available, what should we do then? First of all, after debug, what should we output here? Actually, it's not really about what to output first. At this point, we only have one way to output. If you don't have a volume group, there's really nothing else you can do. You just need to report an error, that's all. Just output an error message. So here, let's write volume. Add down after volume group. Not. Okay, here it's group. Alright, so in the end, the message we report is actually that the volume group does not exist. If the volume group doesn't exist, then we report this message. Of course, you can't just write this message here directly. What else do you need? You also need a condition, a check. That is, when this situation happens, what should we do? So when this situation happens, what should we do? So how do we do it? By adding a condition here and then writing our Ansible command after this. lvm.vgs, this part is a bit long, so be careful not to make a mistake when writing it. If you make a mistake, there will actually be quite a few problems when you run it later, so make sure you define it correctly. Alright, let's save it. After binding, we'll go ahead and execute this task next. Actually, this task is relatively long. The content is indeed a bit more extensive than the operations we did before, but overall, the main idea or the core of this task is just one thing, allocating our logical volumes. If it's less than 1500, then we split it into 800 and 800. If that's not enough or we don't have it, then we just say we don't have it, and that's fine. That's the main point of this question. So after we've written this part, what do we do next? First of all, as for running it, just execute it as usual. Just run it normally. For example, here, let's first use our answer command to execute it. Since the content is quite long, if any errors pop up, don't worry, just debug them. If you get an error now, just troubleshoot it. It's perfectly normal to get errors, right? Errors are totally normal. As long as you can debug them, everything will be fine. There's an error here. Where does it say it is? It's in our code. Pay attention to this. It's at line 6, column 7. There should be a prompt here, indicating which line and column the error is in, and what the error is. So let's open it up. Actually, I can already see it, right? The symbol here is written incorrectly. It should be a dot, not a colon. At this position on the 6th line, no, the 7th line, right here, it should be a dot. A dot. Alright, let's save it. An execution. Still line 6, column 7. Let's check line 6, column 7 and see if there's any other issue here. Let's open it up. Just now, we fixed the dot, so that's no longer a problem. Next up is the name with uppercase and lowercase letters, right? That's fine. The name of the logical volume. What is the size? And here it's community, community. A little January. .lvol, to be honest, there's absolutely no issue here at all. The name is specified here at this position. VG, LV, and size. These 3 pieces of information. All are normal. And here we can take a look below, which is about our community. This is the community generate.file system. This is our file system. There's no problem with this either. Let's take a look at the VG, LV, and size here. There shouldn't be any issues with the words. If we look at the error message here, it says so what's mentioned here is an issue with the community.general.lvl module. As for the module here, normally, these modules should have already been created and run properly before, right? Here, what should we look at? Let's check this. Here, we're dealing with information from 2 modules. Let's check whether they have been loaded properly. Here, we use Ansible Navigator, followed by our doc community. A little January. And finally, .lvol at the end. After that, we'll use standard output to display the information and see if everything is normal here. Std out is fine. Angel Navigator doc. Doc. He said he couldn't find one of our contents again. Not being able to find it, this isn't quite right. Under normal circumstances, right now, we are in this situation. Well, if this kind of problem occurs, because this module, how should I put it, we actually haven't installed it before, or maybe it's not that we've never installed it, but overall, what are we doing? We're running it in a normal environment as usual. If it's not here, actually, we can go and let me refresh this part here. Or we can just run it again. Let's execute our running script once more. Here, we're dealing with the Antioch directory, so let's run this script first and see what happens. There are some minor issues with the environment, so let's run this script again. This script is used to set up our environment, or you could say it's the script that initializes the environment at the end. Let's see how it works. Alright, there are a few changes here, some update information. After we finish making these changes and run it again, we'll go back and check. After we come back, we'll check again to see if we have the LVL module here. Just now we couldn't find this module when we searched for it. The module couldn't be found. Yeah, so since we can't find the module here, let's take a look. So what can we use here? We can use this. The one from our first question. Right, that's by logging in with our putman command. After that, in our repository, we can use the Ansible Navigator command to rerun and load our images. Here we first log into the repository and then use the Ansible Navigator image command. With this command, we can download and load some of our images. Alright, the images are here, no problem. The images are available. And then for the other part, which is our collection, we also need to load it here. What does it mean when it says loading starts directing? Actually, everything is here, right? You can see the ones we've used before, like the ones here. This is right. This is what we just did. This is the commonly used one. For example, earlier we used yum, right? And we also used this one. For this particular question, we're actually using this one because this is question 9. In question 9, we're using this one, which is about communities January. This sentence indeed doesn't show the contents of the community January file. That's true. Actually, in Ansible, we do have this, like in the file we just looked at, right? It exists, and the error is about our community general issue. Okay, so let's take a look at this here. If this one doesn't exist, let me check another one. The other one is generate the file system. Does this work properly? This one also doesn't exist. As for these two, under normal circumstances, they should be present in the environment. We also just reinitialized the script, but nothing is shown here. Let's take a look at this. Answerable. Debug. This should exist. This one is present. And then there's the other state. This one exists too, so both debug and state are finded. Both are here, but the two modules, community, generate.lvl, and team, are not present. If they're not present, let's take a look. Previously, when we installed these things, normally actually... in fact, we never manually installed this. Something like community.general, right? Previously, when we installed roles, it was actually just that, right? Just installed. Like the balance role, the PHP info role, right? We created the alpha key role ourselves. And before that, of course, we configured a collection, right? We did configure a collection. After we configured the collection at that time, let's take a look at the situation with the collection. We use Ansible. When we use the dash navigator to check the collection, we actually only have part of it, right? So here, let's use this doc. Under normal circumstances, this should exist. It should be there. Where did we install this? It was installed in question 5, right? When we verified question 5, there was actually no problem. Let's take another look at the file from question 5. Let's cd into this directory. This should be what we installed in question 5. At the beginning, it really wasn't there. And we installed this in question 5, including LVL and so on. Right? If it's not here, then let's check the situation for question 5 again. So if later on you encounter some questions that you can't solve, you can always go back and review the earlier content. For the exam questions, our environment is generally fine. Because in our practice environment, sometimes there might be some issues, like certain services not starting up and so on. This can happen. But in the actual exam environment, basically, these kinds of problems almost never occur. If you do encounter an error, just check the previous questions, and that should be enough. Alright, so here, let's first check our requirements content. Here we can see that actually the second one here, the second item is the one we just used, right? The community general collection. That's the one, right? No problem. Now let's take another look at this. Let's install it again. Just run the command again, after Ansible Galaxy. Add collection install. After install, simply add R requirements and P to specifically specify our installation path, which is located under the Ansible directory in home greg. In the My Collection directory under the Ansible directory. Then run the installation again. After installing, let's use Navigator to check whether those two we just mentioned were installed successfully. The purpose of installing these is not just for the sake of installation. We'll actually use them in the exercises later. Collections. Let's take a look. Hey, here it is. Community.general. It's already done. Okay, if there are no issues, let's exit, and then execute the command for this exercise. Let me find the command. After Ansible Navigator, we use run to execute something in the LVM LVYML file. Alright, let's run it here and see how it works. If you encounter a situation where a certain module can't be recognized, it's usually due to one of two issues. First, you might have written the module name incorrectly. Second, the module hasn't been loaded, or you didn't successfully download it. For example, the situation we just had was because the module wasn't downloaded properly. Now, as you can see here, there are actually no issues at the end, right? The results at the end, green, yellow, and the skipped blue ones, overall, there aren't any problems. However, I don't know if you noticed, but during the process just now, something red popped up. Let's go back and take a look at it. First of all, here you can see that for Node 2, Node 3, Node 4, and Node 5, what happened? It says that the volume group does not exist. This is our third type of situation, right? Okay. And then here, we see Node 1. There's also an error reported here. What does it say? It says that our volume group research does not have enough space here. So what should we do? If there's no space, what do? We just create it, right? Create it. Well, as for the final result here, actually, it looks a bit messy, but in the end, what do we really need to look at? Just check this. Actually, if you run this here, there won't be any problem. Whether it's 800 or 1500 or even if there's nothing, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's our file and everything is normal, that's fine. If it runs normally, then there's no issue. As for whether it's 800 or 1500 specifically, that doesn't really matter. This actually depends on the specific situation in your environment. For this, we can add something after Ansible. Ancient 2 Boz himself. We can use a command to check, right? For example, let's use the LVS command, okay, and press enter. After executing it, the result is, well, we can see it. Node 2. What about 54? It's 1500. No problem, right? And node 3, it's 800, okay? And what about 1? There isn't 1. So this is our situation. 3 cases, 1500, 800, and none. That's right. This is exactly the result we want. This is the final desired outcome. Of course, you can also use, for example, the command to check the PID. Add DV under the blkd command. Search. Research. This command can also be used to check and as we can see, 5, 4, 3, no, it's 3542, right? 3542, and the type is all. XT4, no problem, right? And as for 1, there isn't any, because there's no volume group. So this is the situation for question 9. Overall, you can see that the content is getting more and more and increasingly complex. As we go further, the file contents might get longer and longer. Of course, basically, this question is already considered one of the longer ones. And there are still 1 or 2 more questions later on that are about the same length as this one. So here, don't get discouraged just because you see a long question, right? You might think it's going to be very troublesome, but actually, as long as you clearly understand the function of each module, what each module does, what specific task it handles, then when an error occurs, you just need to know which part is reporting the error and how to troubleshoot it. Once you get these aspects clear, that's really all you need, even though it looks long if you break it down, right? Even though it seems lengthy here if you split it up. Now, how many parts are there really? There are just 3 parts. The first part deals with the 1500, right? The second part handles the 800, and the third part is, well, when there's not enough or something doesn't exist, we just report an error, right? This is the situation for our question 9. Here, what you mainly need to pay attention to is that question 9 is actually related to question 5 from earlier. Yes, it's connected to question 5 because in question 5, we installed a module that's needed for question 9. If you didn't install it in question 5, or if you installed it incorrectly, then you won't be able to do question 9, just like the situation we just encountered. So everyone needs to pay attention to this. Make sure to take note. So this is our method for creating and using logical volumes in question 9. The main thing is for everyone to pay attention, right? The different sizes, when you're verifying at the end, don't get worried if you see a red error message and think there's a problem. Actually, there's no issue. As long as your file can be executed, then the format of your file is definitely correct. As for the specific content inside, what we're really dealing with is just the size 15800 and the name data. Here, right? Just make sure that each name is data, okay? As for the size, it should either be 1500 or 800. Or it might not be there at all. That's basically our approach for question 9. This is the solution, creating and using classes. Everyone, make sure to double check everything carefully. If you run into problems, don't panic. There's no need to get too anxious. If there's an error, there's always a reason for it. It won't just happen for no reason. When you get an error, it usually comes down to 2 situations, right? One is that maybe you've misspelled a word or a symbol in one of the modules in your file. The other is what? The other is that maybe one of the previous questions caused the module not to load successfully, or it wasn't installed properly. In that case, just reinstall it and it should be fine. So this is our method for creating and using logic, and in this problem, we happen to encounter a pretty significant error. We managed to troubleshoot it, we fixed the error. If you run into any errors later on, what can you do? Right, you can also calm down, take a moment to analyze exactly where the problem is. That's our approach. That's the setup for the logic section of question 9 on Sommelier. If you need the complete question bank, you can leave a comment below, just in and purchase the most reliable question bank at the best price. We'll stop here for now. Goodbye, everyone.